So if you plan to install your 4th gen Intel Xeon CPU into the LGA 4677 socket, then the CPU installation is completely different and very confusing, and there's no videos out there. And then since I'm doing the testing on this one with this 3475X CPU, I thought I'm gonna make this guide how to install the CPU, because when I did this, there was a lot of things that wasn't even instructed, but very confusing, and I would do in a different way.
Looking for a cheap way to license your Windows? Check out Whokeys through the links in the video description. Make sure to use the code TN20 to get a 30% off. Paste the license to the activation settings and you're all done. This license is for Windows 10, but you can upgrade it to Windows 11 for free. They also offer Microsoft Office 19 license. Use the same code TN20 to get a 30% off. Check out whokeys.com in the video description below.
Okay, first of all, when you've got your CPU, just take the Xeon out and then put it somewhere on the side into a safe surface, because we're going to do a few things first. I am using the Asus Pro WS W790E motherboard for this. But this should be the same, doesn't matter which make of the motherboard you go. If the socket is LGA 4677, then this is how it works. The motherboard, first of all, comes with like this protective sleeve on it, and you're wondering how do you get it out, and maybe you start bending these and trying to bend these over these little nuts, but actually these nuts do unscrew. They might be a little bit tight, but just tightly untighten them and then they come loose undone. So what you do is just take these nuts out. Okay, once you've got these 4 out, leave them on the side, because if you ever change this or put the motherboard on the side, you want to put these back in there, because now the motherboard cover comes out quite quickly. And then it says little arrows here. If you bend these in slightly and then push up, the cover comes off. But I'm going to leave the cover on just in case for now, because we're gonna have to do a few more things, but I'll leave the nuts on so you know. Then when you get the motherboard, you're gonna have 2 of these CPU brackets, and this is something completely different than your usual CPUs. Basically, you're gonna have to install the CPU to this bracket first, and then this bracket to the cooler, and then the cooler with the bracket and the CPU, boom, onto the motherboard, which is a little bit different. You don't slot the CPU in there first and then the cooler on top. There's a bracket that the CPU needs to go in first. But there's 2 brackets, and with my motherboard version here, both of them come with this instruction, and both of them show exactly the same instructions, and then they don't show you what is the difference between these 2 brackets. Now there is slight difference on top of the little plastic wrappers here. One of them is E1B64L and E1A120L, but they don't show like what's the difference and which one should you be using. If you are looking at the instructions that comes with your cooler, I'm using an AIO from NMAX here, which you'll see in a moment, then they might show you the shape of the bracket in there, which they show you this plastic ones without the metal ones. And I'm just wondering here, what is the actual difference between those 2 ones here? But as far as I can tell, if you are using the Xeon 34 series, then you will have these little notches of the CPU on that side, and then one of them on the top. And then if we're going to take this plastic one, bear in mind that the little arrow is on the bottom left for me right now. And then if I take this same over here, because there's a little arrow on this bracket on the bottom left now, if I'm going to line these up, you can see that these notches will line up with the CPU there, as you can see. If I take the other bracket and I'm going to put the arrow on the bottom here as well, then you can see that these notches don't line up. One of them is like here on the bottom middle, and then the other one on the top there, but there is no kind of a notch on the CPU. So if you're trying to install this into the CPU into the bracket, it doesn't really work. This is what you're gonna have to do. Take your CPU and you're gonna really wanna flip it over so you're holding the CPU from the IHS over there. And then remember that your corner is on the bottom left, but now is on the bottom right. But you can see it in the back of the CPU here as well. It's on this corner there. And then you're gonna take the bracket and you're gonna flip it over as well. And then your bracket back is on here, as you can see, the corner is on the same side. But now we're gonna have to install the CPU. Don't flick this little metal bar there. Make sure that this stays intact over there. And then we're gonna take the CPU, and there's a little notch on this side of the CPU, or like a little dent in there, and then that dent goes onto that metal bracket over there. So you can just gently put the CPU in there. You can see that on the top it goes underneath that little latch over there. and then hold the CPU like with your fingers underneath there, as you can see my fingers there. And then you're gonna have to bend the bracket a little bit so that your CPU will fall in, and then the notches will go, as you can see, on the left or right. And then now on the bottom bit as well, it gets a little bit of figuring out, but now your CPU is in there. You can see it holds it from there, top, right, and then bottom, it is all over there. And then when you flip it on the other side, you can see that it just holds the CPU there. And if I take hold of the bracket, it kind of holds the CPU. Now, it's not very solid and it can still fall out. So when you're working with this bracket, even though it feels solid, when you bend the bracket a little bit, your CPU might fall out. So be very, very careful with how you're handling the CPU, okay? And now you can put the CPU with the bracket on the side, and then now comes the cooler preparation. Whether you're using air cooling or liquid cooling, you want to have your cooler ready for installation, because the cooler will come like that, and then you need some kind of bracket from the manual. Just look at the manual and look at the LGA 4677 installation, and then you will have some kind of bracket. Now, I have this NMAX here, and then it comes with this. This is the right bracket for it. You can see there's like double holes on every single hole there. Or like side, every single corner, there's double holes. And then that will have to just slot in there. And then when you're going to use it and you start slotting it in there, looks like, okay, that's the end there, right? But then actually it is not fully seated in. And even though it feels like this is in, you're going to have to press it quite hard, and then it will go in all the way. As you can see, there's a big click, and then now it perfectly lines up on this side. And then in my particular cooler, because the socket is oriented like top to bottom, so we've got the RAM slots on the top and on the bottom. If you've got the RAM slots like on left and right, you might have it in a different way, but I can install this cooler either tubes down or tubes up. It doesn't matter, because the orientation is exactly the same. I'm going to be putting the tubes up right now like that, so I know that this will line up there. And then I can put the CPU fan over there, so it's going to be a little bit better this way. But just double check the orientation, which way you want to put the cooler, this way or that way. But I know this doesn't matter whether my tubes are up or down. And then now what the instructions will say is you take your CPU, okay? I'd recommend you take the cover off now. Okay, and now be very, very careful. Don't drop anything in there. Don't spit in there. Make sure that none of these pins get bent. Don't touch any of these, just stay away from these pins, okay? And then take your CPU, and now make sure that you know which way your CPU corner is going to be lining up. As you can see, I've got the corner here, and then one of the corner is cut on there, and I can see the corner, a little marked arrow on the CPU there as well, but it goes on the top left corner. And then you can see the arrow there as well, which will be this corner there. So I know that initially my CPU will be installed in there like that. Just before you install there, double check underneath that you don't have any muck on the pins in there. If you've maybe touched this, what you might want to do is have a little bit of a microfiber cloth and gently just brush all the dust off, so that you don't have any little fluff or something like that that will prevent the pins to make perfect contact. I'd say hold the CPU just like that on the bracket, and then I'll know that my tubes will go up on the bracket, and then you literally just line these CPU and the bracket up. Now, you would have to actually apply thermal paste at this point now here, but I'm just going to show you the installation dry, and then we'll do it with thermal paste as well. And I'll show you that actually there's a little bit of a better way of doing the thermal paste. But when you would want to install the thermal paste now, and then install the bracket to the cooler just like that. It will just line up on both sides, and then you just click it in, and then these little notches on all of the sides will hold the CPU on the actual cooler. As you can see, it's not falling off. And what you would want to do now is install this, which to me seems very, very scary. You want to install your cooler gently, just lowering down to the bracket holes there, and then boom, we've got the CPU actually installed into the right socket, and like same way. You can do a little wiggle, but basically the CPU is installed properly now. But to me, there's a few issues there that I'd like to fix, and which I'm not quite happy with. First of all, let me just gently take it off here as well. When you take it off, just make sure that your CPU doesn't drop down there. When you've got it installed here, you can see that there is actually a gap. Can you see between the CPU and the cooler there? If you might like push it in there, you're gonna have your thermal paste boom on the CPU, and then it's gonna peel off and put it back in there. peel off. So I don't think this is the best way. What I would do is remove the CPU, especially because you've touched the IHS here as well, and you've got fingerprints, as you can see I have over there. What I would do is check underneath. Okay, I've got the pins all clear, and then I would take the bracket and then lower the bracket in to the right place with the corner. Okay, now the CPU is in the socket over there, and then you can see it doesn't move. By the way, just a very interesting thing. If I'm going to take the CPU out here gently, you can see that these notches on all of the sides of the CPU actually cover some of these pins. And I thought, oh, when you put the CPU in there, the pins will be not covered. But actually, there's a whole row of pins all the way around the CPU that never make contact with the socket. If you look here, like where these notches or these little clips of the CPU, where do they go? They go all the way around, left, right, and bottom here. The notch will go in there, but if you look closely, there is a whole row of pins here that don't make contact with the CPU at all. Because you can see that the corner of the CPU, it will be cornered with that and this side over here. As you can see, let me put it back in. I'll zoom it a bit further in so you can see. As you can see, the CPU here is completely in the corner, in the corner, in the corner, in the corner of the socket, okay? And now let's go underneath and check like those pins here again. Gently take it off. So you can see that it was matched in that corner, and as you can see, there is like a layer of two of pin here's, maybe 2 rows even of pins on the back of the CPU. Boom. That don't make contact with any of the pins on the socket. And it's the same way, I think, around the sides here as well. So there's like a row of pins all the way around of this CPU that don't make any contact at all. So I'm not sure if these are troubleshooting or testing pins or something like that with a different socket. But in this socket here, they don't make any contact, which is just interesting thing to see. I don't know why. If anyone can explain this, I don't know. What I would do next is, if you have a bit of alcohol or something like that, you want to clean the CPU IHS. I am using the toilet paper, which is not the best in terms of fiber like release. It releases fibers, so I'm gonna have to make sure that I don't have any little fibers in there, but it will do the trick. I'll show you what. I'll just put a drop of alcohol. Whoa, that was a bit too much. So I'm gonna take another one in the back here just to kind of dampen it or dry it up a bit. And then we just wanna take all of our finger grease off all the way from the CPU, okay? You can see the fingerprints are now actually gone. And then if you have the same with the cooler, peeling this off. And because it's actually been used before, I'm gonna do the same with the CPU cooler. I'm just gonna be wiping this clean. And you might be saying, oh, you might have some fibers on your CPU socket. What I like to do then is take like a little microfiber cloth and then gently just push it over to make sure that there's no dust or little flakes or something like that left from my toilet roll, toilet paper, and then do the same on the CPU cooler, whether you've got air cooler or liquid cooler. And then now comes the point where we want to apply thermal paste. But before you apply thermal paste, make sure you know where the screws are that you screw your cooler into these screws there, because you're going to need them instantly after we do this. I've got plenty of Arctic MX6 thermal paste here. So what I'll be doing is I'm going to be doing a big long line over there and a big long line over here. Okay, you can do it in dots or however way, but the best way to actually spread the paste is if you've got a little spatula, something like that. That's why doing this without the CPU in the socket will be so hard. So I'm going to be spreading the thermal paste out now with this spatula. If you have any excess thermal paste, try to rub it off, because you don't want there to be a ton of extra there as well. So I'm just gonna be like a skinny kind of a, if it's covered, it's fine, but I'm taking anything extra off. Arctic MX6, by the way, quite a cheap thermal paste, but very good as well if you wanna get that one. I'm gonna have the tubes up, okay, and then now slowly lower it into the socket, into the screw holes, and make sure you make a nice contact over there. And then now keep pressure on it, but what you want to do is do a little wiggle, because you're gonna get a really nice, like, put pressure down and then wiggle it on the CPU, because then you'll just get it really nicely tight over there. and then take these screws. Make sure you do have the right screws, because in my cooler there is two. There's like a bit of darker screws and then a bit of a lighter screws. The darker screws have a deeper thread. They're longer as well. So I'm going to put diagonals in first, so it starts to hold down, and tighten it with your finger as much as you can. And then now you can let go, because I know the corners are tightened down. And then make sure that you've got it parallel as well, because it does move around on the socket a little bit. So make sure just that the cooler is lined up nicely on the socket. Make sure that you don't go over to the top RAM slot there, so you're not going to lose compatibility with the top RAM slot. I'll have to push it down a little bit. Okay, there we go. Okay, once these are like kind of finger tight, you want to take a screwdriver and then screw them all the way down when you reach like the end. Like, don't massively over tighten them, but when you reach the hard stop, that's that. And try to tighten them in a star pattern. So like a few turns there, a few turns there, like that, until you're all the way down. Okay, boom. You know when you've reached the hard end, when it just doesn't turn anymore. You've got the perfect tension of those screws on. Boom. And then now basically your CPU cooler is installed. Make sure that you add like the AIO pump fan somewhere as well. And then now you can move on to installing your other things. But basically, if you are installing a CPU like that, then that's what I would do. And this is like the best way how I have found installing the CPU. And then sometimes reading the instructions and seeing someone do it visually, it gives you confidence. Okay, I think that's how I'm doing it. And seeing it like how I'm doing it or someone else do it just gives you confidence. So hopefully this video was helpful for you. But if you do want to build yourself the best bang for buck create a PC, then I've got a build guide in the description below. There's a video for you, whatever your budget is, from about $500 all the way to $5,000+. But if you want the best bang for buck, go check it out. And also, I'm going to leave the links of all of these in the description below if you'd like to pick up this cooler, because this is a special cooler for like the large, you know, IHS CPUs like the Threadrippers and the Xeons, and this motherboard and the rest of the things there. Thanks guys for watching. Bye bye.